There is a house that costs $3,500. Not a shack. Not a trailer with duct tape holding the walls together. Not some off-grid fantasy that falls apart after the first winter. This is a structure that survives magnitude 7 earthquakes without cracking. That keeps the inside cool at 110 degrees without air conditioning, without a single fan running. That lasts 500 years without replacing a roof, a wall, or a foundation. And you build it with your own 2 hands using the dirt sitting right now underneath your front yard. This house exists. It was built for thousands of years across every continent, and somebody decided you are no longer allowed to do it. We need to go back to understand how much was taken from us, not a little back. 10,000 years back. The place is the Jordan Valley, in a region that today sits between Israel and Palestine. There was a city called Jericho, and when I say city, I need you to feel the weight of that word. Jericho was not a campsite. It was not a cluster of huts where people huddled around fires. It was a walled settlement with engineered structures designed to last, and the material they used was mud. Wet earth pulled from the riverbanks, shaped into blocks by hand, left under the desert sun until they hardened like stone. Those blocks were stacked into walls nearly 3 feet thick and over 8 feet tall. At that point in history, there was no written language, no wheel, no bronze, no iron, but there was earth construction. And pieces of those walls are still standing right now, at this very moment, while you are listening to this. 10,000 years of sun, rain, wind, war, flood, and earthquake, and the earth held. That was not an accident. That was not primitive people getting lucky with mud pies. That was the first engineered building material in human history, and it worked so well that civilizations on separate continents, with zero contact between them, arrived at the same solution independently. In China, 3,000 years before Christ, workers were filling wooden frames with damp earth and pounding it flat with heavy timber rams, layer after layer, until the walls stood hard as rock. They called it hangtu, which we know as rammed earth, and with that method they built the Great Wall. Not the stone sections that show up on postcards, the original wall, the one that stretched across deserts and mountain passes for thousands of miles. Sections of that rammed earth wall are still standing after 5,000 years. Let that sit for a second. 5,000 years. The house you are living in right now was probably built in the last 50, and it already needs a new roof. In the Fujian province of southern China, entire communities lived inside massive circular fortresses called tulu. These were not small buildings. A single tulu rose 3 to 5 stories tall, housed up to 800 people, and had walls 6 feet thick at the base that tapered as they climbed, distributing weight the way a cathedral distributes load. 1 entrance, 1 gate. Inside, a courtyard open to the sky surrounded by hundreds of rooms stacked in rings. Families were born inside those walls, got married inside them, raised their children, and grew old inside them. Generation after generation under the same roof of packed earth. In 1918, a magnitude 7 earthquake hit the region. Concrete buildings collapsed. Timber structures splintered. The tulu did not fall. Not one. 0 collapses. The earth walls flexed where rigid materials cracked. They absorbed energy that shattered everything around them. Today, those tulu are UNESCO World Heritage Sites, recognized by the entire world as masterpieces of engineering. And families still live in them, 500 years after they were built. 500 years. Your subdivision will be a parking lot by then. Cross the ocean to Devon, England. Builders there mixed clay-rich soil with sand, straw, and water, then stacked it by hand in wet layers that dried into solid monolithic walls. No joints, no seams, no mortar. They called it cob. Hundreds of cob cottages still stand in Devon today. Some are 500 years old and people live in them right now. Warm in winter without cranking a furnace, cool in summer without running the AC, and they have never needed the kind of repairs that modern American homes demand every 15 to 20 years. Now come back to this side of the Atlantic. In New Mexico, Taos Pueblo has been continuously inhabited for over 1,000 years. Not a ruin behind a velvet rope, not a museum exhibit, a home. People sleep there tonight. Adobe walls built by the Pueblo peoples using the same principles that worked in Jericho, in China, in England. Earth, water, straw, sun. The formula never changed because it never needed to. The physics behind all of this is so simple, it almost feels like someone is hiding it on purpose. Every method uses the same core principle. You take Earth, the most abundant material on the planet, and you shape it into walls. Clay acts as the binder, like cement. Sand gives it structure and prevents cracking. Straw or plant fiber adds tensile strength so the wall can handle stress without splitting. Water activates the chemical bond between particles. That is it. No kiln, no factory, no supply chain shipping materials across 3 states. Rammed earth walls hit a compressive strength between 300 and 1,000 pounds per square inch. Standard concrete block sits at 1,000 to 1,500. The gap is a lot smaller than the people selling you concrete want you to believe. And Earth has something concrete will never have: thermal mass. A 2-foot-thick earth wall absorbs heat during the day and releases it slowly at night. In climates with real temperature swings like most of the American Southwest, this creates a natural heating and cooling cycle that performs at an insulation value above R20. No fiberglass bats, no spray foam full of chemicals, no electricity bill climbing every summer. You do not heat an earth home. You do not cool it. The walls do it for you. And they have been doing it for 10,000 years. Now, here is where the math gets uncomfortable for anyone with a mortgage. An earthbag dome home, about 400 square feet, costs between $2,000 and $5,000 in materials. The same square footage in conventional stick framing costs $80,000 to $150,000 depending on where you live. The average American home price in 2024 crossed $420,000. Sit with that number. $420,000 for a structure built with materials that start degrading the moment they are installed. Oriented strand board that swells when it gets wet. Vinyl siding that cracks in UV light. Asphalt shingles rated for 20 to 30 years if you are lucky. You pay nearly $500,000 for something designed to fall apart within your lifetime so you can pay to fix it again. Or you spend $5,000, 30 days of labor, and build something that outlasts everything on your block by 4 centuries. That is not a building debate. That is a business model versus a birthright. The man who understood this better than anyone was named Nader Khalili. Born in Iran, trained as an architect, Khalili spent 5 years traveling through the deserts of his homeland, studying the people who still built with earth the old way. He watched villagers in remote regions construct homes from nothing but soil and sunlight. Homes that stayed cool when the outside temperature hit 120 degrees. Homes that had been standing for generations with zero maintenance. No contractor ever visited those villages. No building inspector ever signed off on those walls. And those walls outlasted everything the modern world had put up around them. Khalili moved to California and dedicated the rest of his life to a single idea: that the poorest person on earth should be able to build safe, permanent shelter with their own hands and the dirt under their feet. He invented a method called super adobe. The concept is almost aggressively simple. You take polypropylene bags, the same kind used for sandbags and grain storage, and you fill them with moistened earth from your own land. You lay them in courses like bricks, one row on top of another. Between each course, you run 2 strands of 4-point barbed wire. The bags compress under their own weight. The barbed wire locks each layer to the next, creating tensile strength across the entire structure. Then you shape it. A dome or vault distributes load so efficiently that no internal framing, no posts, no beams are needed. The structure holds itself up through geometry. Khalili founded the California Institute of Earth Art and Architecture, known as CalEarth, in Hesperia, California, out in the Mojave Desert. He trained students from dozens of countries. He built prototype after prototype. And then he did something that should have changed everything. He partnered with NASA. The space agency was looking for methods to build shelters on the moon and Mars using local materials, because shipping lumber and concrete to another planet is not exactly practical. Khalili showed them that the same earthbag technique that could house a family in the desert for $5,000 could house astronauts on the lunar surface. NASA validated the engineering. The method that could shelter humans on another world was the same method being denied to humans on this one. Back in California, Khalili submitted his structures to the most punishing building tests in the country. California seismic standards are among the strictest on the planet because the state sits on fault lines that can level entire cities. His earthbag domes passed. Structures that cost a few $1,000s to build survived simulated forces equivalent to major earthquakes. They passed fire resistance tests. They passed load-bearing tests. Khalili did not just claim Earth building was safe. He proved it under the exact conditions the code demanded, and the code barely moved. He died in 2008, still fighting the same bureaucratic walls he had been pushing against for decades. The buildings he left behind are still standing. The codes that blocked them are still standing too. Here is how the trap works, and I want you to understand this clearly, because it affects every single American who has ever thought about building their own home. The International Building Code, which is adopted in some form by nearly every state in the country, does not include earth construction in its standard provisions. It is not listed, it is not recognized. As far as the IBC is concerned, building with earth does not exist. If you want to build with earth, you have to apply for what is called an alternative materials permit. That sounds reasonable until you see what it actually requires. You need a licensed structural engineer, which runs $5,000 to $15,000. You need professional load testing, soil analysis, and seismic evaluation. You need months of bureaucratic review where your application sits in a pile while someone decides whether to even look at it. The engineering approval alone often costs more than the entire earthbag house, and in many rural counties across America, they will not even start the process. They just say no. No review, no testing, no appeal, just no. The International Code Council, the organization that develops and maintains the IBC, receives substantial input from the industries that profit from conventional construction. Concrete manufacturers, lumber companies, steel producers. The companies that sell building materials help write the rules about which building materials are allowed. Think about that for a second. The people who make money when you buy their product are the same people who decide whether you are allowed to use a free alternative. A wall made from the dirt in your backyard generates zero revenue for the lumber yard, zero for the concrete plant, zero commissions for the general contractor. It cannot be packaged, shipped, or marked up. And because it does not fit into any standard appraisal category, mortgage lenders will not finance it. Banks cannot process a loan for a structure they cannot classify. Insurance companies will not cover a home that is not code compliant, even if that home has a proven track record of surviving 5 centuries of weather that would destroy anything they do insure. The result is a closed loop. Even if you own your land free and clear, even if you paid cash for every bag of earth, even if the soil on your property is the same soil that built structures still standing after millennia, you cannot legally build a $5,000 earth home on your own land in most of the United States. You must use approved materials from approved suppliers. You must hire approved contractors at approved rates. And if you want to live in what you built, you must take out a mortgage and pay it back for 30 years, generating profit for banks, insurers, material suppliers, and the code enforcement offices that exist to make sure you stay inside the system. The science does not care about building codes. Researchers at the University of Bath in England spent years conducting controlled studies on rammed earth construction, measuring everything from compressive strength to moisture regulation to thermal cycling performance. Their findings confirmed what 10,000 years of standing walls already demonstrated. Rammed earth is structurally sound, thermally superior in most climates, and requires almost zero maintenance across its lifespan. In 2019, a peer-reviewed study published in the Journal of Building Engineering compared rammed earth walls against conventional construction across the full life cycle of a building, measuring carbon emissions, energy consumption, water usage, and material waste from construction through demolition. Earth did not just compete. It won across every single metric they measured, and not by a narrow margin. The environmental case alone should have triggered a national conversation about building policy. It did not. Because the conversation was never really about performance. It was about profit. But the world is not monolithic, and not every government chose to protect the same interests. New Zealand wrote rammed earth directly into its national building code, giving it the same legal standing as timber, concrete, or steel. If you want to build a rammed earth home in New Zealand, you follow the code, pull your permit, and build. No alternative materials petition. No $15,000 engineering review to prove that dirt works. Germany and Australia established their own rammed earth construction standards that are used commercially right now. Builders in Western Australia are putting up rammed earth homes that sell at premium prices because buyers understand that a wall which lasts 5 centuries and regulates its own temperature is worth more than a stick frame box wrapped in Tyvek. The United Nations Human Settlements Program, UN Habitat, actively promotes earth construction as the most viable path to affordable housing in developing nations where conventional materials are either unavailable or unaffordable. The global consensus is moving. The American code system is not. And yet, inside the United States, people are building anyway. At Cal Earth in the Mojave Desert, Khalili's Institute still operates. Instructors teach super adobe construction to students who fly in from around the world. They build full-scale domes by hand in a matter of days. A couple shows up with nothing but savings and a patch of desert land and leaves, knowing how to construct a home that will outlast anything their neighbors are paying $500,000 for. In Oregon and Northern California, Ianto Evans and the Cobb Cottage Company brought cob building back to North America starting in the early 90s. Their workshops fill up every season. Families drive hundreds of miles to spend a week learning how to mix earth and straw with their bare feet, press it onto rising walls, and sculpt window openings with their fingers. Michael Smith wrote a book called The Hand-Sculpted House that became the quiet Bible of the natural building movement, passed between builders like something you are not supposed to have. In Europe, the Cobbage Project, funded by the European Union, is actively researching modern cob construction methods that meet contemporary thermal efficiency standards, proving that ancient techniques can be updated without losing what made them work in the first place. Rammed Earth Works in Australia builds commercial structures that satisfy every modern code requirement and command premium market prices. They are proof that when the system allows it, people will pay more for permanence, not less. The market is not the obstacle. The code is the obstacle. And across rural America, in counties where enforcement is thin and the nearest building inspector is 2 hours away, owner-builders are raising earth bag domes, cob cottages, and adobe walls for a fraction of what their neighbors owe the bank. They share construction plans on internet forums. They film their builds and post them so strangers can learn. They teach the family next door and the family down the road. Some of them get fined. Some of them get demolition orders stapled to their front door. Some of them fight in court and win. The movement does not have a spokesperson or a logo or a lobbying budget. It has dirt and hands and people who decided that 30 years of debt for a house that starts rotting the day you move in is not the only option. The housing crisis in this country is not some unsolvable mystery wrapped in complicated economics. It is a math problem. $5,000 versus $420,000. 30 days of work versus 30 years of payments. A structure proven to last 500 years versus one engineered to need a new roof every 2 decades and new siding every 15. 30 to 50% of the world's population is living in earth buildings right now, today. Not because they cannot afford something else, but because in many cases, there is nothing else that performs as well for the cost. The walls of Jericho did not fall because they were weak. The Tulu of Fujian did not crack because they were primitive. The Cobb cottages of Devon did not crumble because they were temporary. They held because earth holds. It always has. The knowledge is in the ground beneath your feet, in every handful of clay, in every wall that has been standing for centuries while the approved materials rotted and were replaced and rotted again beside it. They buried the method under paperwork and permit fees and codes written by the people who sell you the alternative. But you cannot bury earth. It is everywhere. It is free. And it remembers what we were taught to forget, that shelter is not a product, that a home does not require a bank's permission, that the ground you are standing on right now already contains everything you need to build something that will outlast you, your kids, and the system that tried to stop it. If any of this hit different for you, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment and tell me. Have you ever thought about building your own place? Maybe you have land sitting somewhere, and you have been running numbers in your head wondering if there is another way. Maybe your grandparents or great-grandparents built something with their hands that is still standing, and nobody ever gave them credit for it. Whatever your story is, share it below, because the people watching this need to hear it just as much as you needed to hear what was in this video. This channel runs on people like you who refuse to let this knowledge stay buried. If you are not subscribed yet, come be part of this. Hit subscribe, tap that bell, and stick around because the next archive is already being pulled from the vault, and trust me, What is inside it is going to make you rethink something else they told you was impossible. I will see you in the next one.